Hello.
Hi.
How are you doing, Alice?
Doing good, and you?
Great. All good this side.
I'm trying to, because I wanted to do a cool background, but let me just try and put it.
Go ahead. You know how to use it, right? The arrow and all.
What do you mean the arrow?
You see the icon of a video. There is a small arrow next to it. You click on it, and then you can add a virtual background.
So I was going in settings every time.
Yeah. It happened to me also the first time. So amazing. So to keep you posted, Alice, in the meantime, we're going to have around 40 people that are a mixture of wanna be launching an accelerator incubator or are already managing, startup support organizations in Tunisia. So it's a very targeted audience, which is great. So we will be giving you the time to, share your experience about everything that happened with SEEDSTARS, the growth stages, etc. And then I will be taking care of, resuming all the questions so that we don't have duplications and ask them to you one by one in that sense. Sounds
Perfect.
Good?
Yeah. I think that will be easier to manage the questions and expectation. Perfect.
Yeah, we tested both, and I think this is what works best.
Yeah.
And so that people won't be joining on Zoom, but Zoom is forecasted on the platform eVay where they are gonna have us live.
Okay. So it's just gonna be you and me on Zoom, correct?
Yes, and we are live on the platform.
And so you will want host disable parts of the screen share. So can you enable so that
co-host. You are a co-host now. Perfect.
So let me just check, because last time it was a bit slow. So share screen. Share, what am I sharing? This one, play. So you can see it, correct?
Yes, ma'am, I can see it.
Perfect. Okay, this is off.
Donc, on pourrait faire ça en français ou en anglais, c'est comme tu veux.
Peut-être, en fait, pour moi, surtout quand je parle de toutes nos activités, etc., c'est plus simple en anglais, si ça ne dérange pas. Mais bon.
Of course.
Is that good? Sure.
No, it's perfect. No, we had most of the sessions in English, but I always, when the person is French speaker, I give them the choice because the audience will be understanding both.
Okay, cool.
Perfect. So we will be live in a minute. I'm gonna inform my colleague to. All right. So hello, everybody. We're super excited to have you again joining us at Ins and Outs of Ecosystem Building. So it's becoming a habit by now. Each Monday and Thursday, we're having amazing people in the spirit of giving back, jumping on calls with us and making interesting exchange with them. So for people that are joining for the first time with us, so this program is actually a fruit of a collaboration between Smart Capital and myself. I'm part of the team, and Projet Innovi, European Union for Innovation. So together we were, brainstorming on an interesting way to, expose our ecosystem internationally and have best practices exchange for capacity building in our ecosystem. And the idea and the program, fulfills this mission by having an interaction each time with people, really experts that were working in the startup industry this last decade and have interesting tips and learnings to share with you guys. So remember, the Q&A is for you. Don't hesitate at any time to send us your questions. We will be taking care of that at the end of the session to ask hopefully all the questions you will be having and all the feedback you want to share with us. So today is actually a very special day. I personally was looking forward to this session too, because the subject is very particular. So, you know, we have the whole, let's say, train of thoughts. We started from understanding how are the dynamics of an ecosystem, what are, you know, practical tools, tips to be able as an accelerator or incubators to grow, to focus on the essentials. And today we will be digging deeper with our dear friend Alice de Tenac, leading SEEDSTARS. She will be digging deeper thanks to her very interesting experience to actually understand how those startup support organizations can grow across the life of a high growth venture, right? We want to be ambitious, we want to think big. So, and we also need to be prepared maybe from now to take into consideration such, you know, learnings and such knowledge sharing. So, hey, Alice, how are you doing?
Hi, everyone. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Great. We're super excited to have you with us. It will be great. I mean, if you have any, you know, let's say experience. I mean, your experience is amazing with SEEDSTARS, etc. But it will be very interesting also to have your background, a little bit of how did that start? How did you find yourself, you know, leading such adventure? The baby steps at the very beginning, because we're having today a lot of, you know, in the audience, a lot of profiles that are ambitious and wanna grow their ventures too. So it would be awesome to have your background, and looking forward to hearing what you have to share with us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to make sure my screen is shared so everyone can see it. Perfect.
Yep, we can see it. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I was speaking with you and your team and reflecting on what could be valuable to share, and actually what I would love to hear from all you as organizations that are trying to build the founding blocks of a sustainable ecosystem for these ventures on the ground. I thought it might be interesting to share with you our vision and mission and how we've approached it to be a sustainable model over time, because I think what is so difficult in the business that we are in, and the fact that we are fundamentally providing our services to a beneficiary, which is the entrepreneur, but that many times cannot pay for these services. And so you find yourself in this B2B, B2G, B2C model, which is very difficult to navigate. And if we had the sweet spot and we knew how to scale effectively and in big quantity these high growth ventures, then we would not be here in many ways. So I think we're still, all of us, experimenting. And in that, we need to build organizations that are agile enough to last, because it's a very tough market. So quickly, a bit about myself. I thought I would share with you this one slide, which always shocks me, because it comes from the blog Wait But Why, that maybe some of you know. And I remember like feeling so small when seeing that all the weeks of my life could fit in one slide. And it really just reminds me on how I approached SEEDSTARS and joined the team, that it was a reflection of, okay, if I have this amount of days, how do I want to use them and for what purpose? And I think that has been kind of the driving constant within SEEDSTARS, how we built the company and how we're also able to recruit talent to join the organization. So I started a very young corporate career, because it lasted 2 years within a cosmetic group, and had that sense of complacence, which didn't make me very comfortable. And I am one of the very lucky entrepreneurs and founders that was able to find the right founding team the first try. And now that we invest in companies and have supported thousands of entrepreneurs, I realize how lucky I am, because it's really a trial and error to figure out that the right team with whom you're willing to go the years and years into the marathon of building whatever business that you have. So I met my co-founders, and 8 years later, nearly 8 years, we're still together building SEEDSTARS. And so maybe to give you a bit of context of what is SEEDSTARS as an organization and the platform that we want to build, in order to think of the longevity of our actions, is we really believe and put down in words our mission, which is impacting people's lives in emerging markets through technology and entrepreneurship. So we believe, and at that time saw that we were at this sweet spot of the rise of emerging markets and them kind of becoming the center of the world, the democratization of technology, which allowed entrepreneurs from everywhere to start their business, but more importantly, be able to talk about scale of impact. And finally, really a global community. It's not at all a developed country construct, a global community of not only entrepreneurs, so young talents believing that entrepreneurship was a viable career path, but also a generation of entrepreneurial minds that have a very strong social drive, so very impact driven, which we see across the different continents. So all that put together felt like we wanted to become that platform to support these entrepreneurs and support having a lot of angles. So SEEDSTARS, if I want to put it simply, we have these two main pillars. On one side, we are a community that provides entrepreneurial education, and we work with different stakeholders to operate these services to support the pipeline of talent that can build these high growth ventures. And on the other side, in support for us, there's also funding. So we make direct equity investments and also bring in other capital inflow through our investor network, but also other types of investments from grant or debt and all the blended finance in between. So I wanted to share with you this. It's complex, but work with me, because I think for organizations like ourselves, that you are for-profit or non-profit, the tension in the growth of our businesses will lie in impact and profit and how you manage that throughout time. And there's not a lot of frameworks to measure your impact. The one that is most used still in the development space, but not that much in the private sector, is the theory of change. So we a year and a half ago really invested time and resources in building our theory of change, which would be kind of which made it much more holistic, our approach to measuring the success of our activities. So let me give you quickly an overview of our theory of change and some main activities that we operate on a day-to-day to support this theory of change, so that you can, maybe it could spark some reflections on what do you want to build as the backbone of how you operate to measure if or if not you're really having impact, versus trying, kind of like we've done in the past, desperately running after a bid or a contact or partner and repitching every time or repackaging it because you need that fuel to move forward. So the theory of change, just so that you understand, is a framework in which, by identifying and measuring your activities, you are able to, through a logic framework, then connect it with an output and an outcome, which will then have an intended impact over the years. Because on top, in our business, when we talk impact, there are these very immediate indicators that we can track, such as we have the Net Promoter Score when we do an acceleration program. We have these feedback surveys on the day-to-day, but the long-term impact, if you are really participating in the growth of an economy, socially and economically, we'll only know 7-10 years down the line. So it allows you to be very rigorous in your measurements over time, so that you can really prove the success or not of your activities. we have this great documentary, which really showcases kind of our activity. And I highly recommend to watch it just to also understand better who are these entrepreneurs behind that we support. But for today, I wanted to share with you our thesis of the theory of change. So this is, we deep dive into the story of Alima, which is one of our investees, Cow Tribe, which is a business in Ghana in agriculture. And we've worked over the years in identifying and targeting these 6%. 6% is a symbolic number that we've used, which came from a research done in the UK that showcased that 6% of all UK companies accounted for over 50% of job creation and a substantial amount of GDP growth. And so our reflection was always, okay, so who are the 6% of emerging markets? Since there have been really incredible studies done by Omidyar Network, to name one, that do identify these businesses around the 4 to 6% in these markets. So I think it is an indicator also of the target of these businesses. And these businesses, specifically these high growth ventures, what we call, have, of course, a high market scale potential and also a strong innovation degree. They're disruptive enough in their industry. So these have been also kind of the ways we've tried to reflect on which businesses do we support. In the ecosystem that we work in, it's many times the so-called startups that we talk about so much. All the micro entrepreneurs and SMEs, we've decided to support them through the support that we give in high growth ventures targeting these types of entrepreneurs. So for example, we've incubated ourselves, but also invested in companies that provide grants for SMEs or support in invoice factoring, or also small lending companies for individual, which are entrepreneurs. So that was our approach to supporting the larger spectrum of entrepreneurs, but really deciding consciously that our focus would be on these high growth ventures. And I think that's super important to understand who are you targeting. Which allows you to be much more clear on the market with regards to the private and public stakeholders that you're trying to attract. Through these studies, they talk about these companies creating over a period of time over 200 jobs. So there's that disproportionate amount of job creation versus the micro entrepreneur, which will be 1, 2, and then the SMEs, which are usually are smaller businesses. So the theory of change is we identify these high growth ventures, which will, if through our support, generate more revenue and receive more funding, which hence will allow them to hire and have more profit over time, which then will create more jobs within the economy and social impact, which over time will bring economic and social development. That's the impact intended. Now, what is it that we do to get to that impact? We provide training, and that goes through SEEDSTARS community and our educational program. We provide investment. And today through a performance assessment that we've done of trying to aggregate all the data of our past activities, because to be honest, we were not smart with the data and the information we had been collected for a while. So there was a huge work in trying to build that, what we call in the development space, monitoring and evaluation framework. And so we've supported over 4,000 companies and now have a capacity to invest in 40 companies per year. Today we have a portfolio, I think by the end of the year, of 70 companies worldwide. Here is the scope of the activities that we provide for entrepreneurs dependent on the maturity of the business. So it was really important for us to support them through a long cycle, because it was the way, because that's how you can reach your mission of impact. It's not necessarily because it was, and I think that's what we made the errors in the past. It's not because that's what was selling on the market at that time. It's because there was a real reflection that they need that support from us, considering the gaps in the markets from pre-idea event to Series A. So what is it that we need to put in place? And the level of customization of these programs or these funds or these community building activities is not necessarily the most difficult part, because if you have really spend time in building the community, then it's just a question of plugging the right people at the right time. And that has been the effort that we have done. And in figuring out how do you incentivize appropriately, not only the startup to join whatever program, whatever fund, whatever community building activity, but also the right mentors, investors, judges, whomever needs to be there at that time to make a difference in the growth of the business. And looking at the brutal facts of what are the incentives, how much can you get quality time or quality money from the right people, has always been top of our mind. And here's just an overview of our portfolio of investment across region and sector. To be able, as I was mentioning before, to provide valuable training and investment, it's all about connecting with the right community of investors, expert mentors. And that's really where we've worked a lot, not just having all these great names to put on the slide, but really with figuring out how can we make the matching appropriate at the right time and make sure people commit to that. So what are the incentives needed? What's the right platform to use? What's the level of engagement with these stakeholders needed so that we can consider ourselves a community versus just a list of people to interact with? And the ones that are paying, as you realize, is not most of the time, especially in the markets we operate in and in the impact-driven approach that we're doing, we're very much the ones still building up the ecosystem. So we've been working with three kind of main categories of stakeholders, maybe corporates, development banks, nonprofits, and governments. And through services that we've understood bring value to them. So for example, corporates, open innovation was extremely important, or with governments and ODAs, it's really important to figure out how do you build sustainable impact in these markets across different thematics. We were able to package our activities so that it made sense for them and the result would be always meaningful for the beneficiary. And so here are some of the different partners over time that we work with, and also across different thematics that over time we've also considered ourselves more and more experts and are investing more time, because it's also something that we believe is fundamental in achieving, as I mentioned always, the long-term impact. For all this to happen, as mentioned before, community is key. And so there's really this push and investment on our behalf to continue and work on the brand, on the community, which was always about putting the entrepreneur first. So we've built a really loud marketing machine so that we could make sure, one, still evangelize kind of the whole concept of impact investing and sustainability and these entrepreneurs, bringing voice to these entrepreneurs across different markets and communities. And so we have not only that, like such as these episodes, documentaries to continue and be loud, we also have the physical spaces where we're there on the ground with the entrepreneurs. And it's an activity that we'll continue to do because there is so much value in putting more premium in your brand, which will by default certify and qualify better those in your community. And finally, a crucial part of our theory of change is experimentation. So in our theory of change, we call it the iterative learning process, but basically it's a model in which we are extremely comfortable and agile in experimenting. I'm not saying we have it right. We're still figuring out what is the appropriate machine to build this DNA of constant experimentation, but that's what we're thriving for. And there was always this idea of for entrepreneurs, by entrepreneurs. So we believe that if SEEDSTARS was going to support high growth ventures, we had to believe we were one ourselves. So there was always an ambition of SEEDSTARS thriving for high potential. And so we ourselves bootstrapped. This is a picture of my founders when we started off in Nigeria. As you can see, seed space was a bit iffy. And now this was a picture of one of our bigger spaces now launched recently. We have over 200 people in the group. And that, I think, is so important, because everything we learn and we believe is a key success factor at SEEDSTARS, we've disseminated it within the community. It becomes part of the programs. When we became like OKR driven, everyone in the programs became OKR. We're recently using a framework to analyze the opportunities of growth in our market. We then share it, and vice versa. We've seen entrepreneurs growth hack their way in super like intelligent ways, and so we've now taken in their best practice. So it's a constant learning machine that I think will allow us to stay agile and close to the facts in order to figure out what is the most appropriate support for these businesses. So some learnings, just to finish quick off, and I would love to hear your thoughts on how you're managing and building your organizations. But it all comes down to culture. But I was thinking maybe to be a bit more pragmatic with you. In the past 2 years, as we grow really in a large organization, and so we're in many ways no longer a startup on many aspects, what we realized was one of the most important leadership approaches in our business was to always confront the brutal facts. And I still see too many entrepreneurs and businesses that are not looking at the facts. What is your market? Who are you targeting? Are they willing to pay? What service is really of value? And I think people have many times this idea of what support should look like, and because their cause is so noble and they're so passionate, it sometimes takes away the reality and the hard facts of what's needed. So that is why at SEEDSTARS, this experimentation machine is really core to our DNA and how we are scaling as an organization, because we really believe that facts are going to allow us to better measure our impact and get us closer to impact. And within the book Good to Great, where they have a whole section about that, but what we reused recently, and I wanted to share with you, is the hedgehog principle, where you really need to figure out what's your sweet spot of growth, with identifying what are you really passionate about, what do you think you can be the best at in the world, and what will drive the economy, like what will allow you to be sustainable in doing that. And you'll realize if you do, and we did this very brutally honest exercise, and realized that we were sometimes chasing the wrong opportunities or trying to convince ourselves that we should be in this industry or on this product, when really was not what was most passionate for us, or not really a driver for sustainability. And to be honest, we would not be the best at it. So we had to recalibrate the options. So it goes with what I was saying in Experiments with Trust, which what you were saying at your introduction, which I thought was really nice, was about the baby steps. And I think people, it's so exhausting, and it's really a marathon, and there's nothing short term in what we do, that we tend to, with all the noise and media attention and whatnot around us, there's this sense that there's going to be that big break, that big deal, that great company from your batch that's gonna just build your track record overnight, that amazing interview coverage, whatever it can be. It's never the case, in the sense that it's really baby steps. And I was reading this really interesting interview from the founder of Airbnb, and they were mentioning that, and even more so, great companies don't even know what was the trigger, because they've been just slowly moving the wheel for so many years that at some point, indeed, it accelerates. But who are you to identify what was the activity, the moment, the talent that made the difference? So it's just about being really convinced and writing down a mission with values that will allow you to take on all the steps that are needed for to grow business. And that really comes down to culture. So we've very early on, because we were remote from day one, had to quickly work on building our values, our mission statement. How would we track and retain our talents? All this was a very early on conversation, luckily for us. So now we have years of experience and like research behind it, which I think has been a key advantage, because it's always been about figuring out what were the right talents to support us in what would be the most appropriate support for the entrepreneurs, because it's just going to constantly change. So it was never really to focus specifically on one service or one product. It was to figure out with whom we wanted to work and what did we want to do over time, having in mind always the constant of the overarching mission. And so at SEEDSTARS, we have some of these values where we try to make them specific enough that people would hate us. It was really conscious decision that we had to be unique enough that it wasn't for everyone. If not, it would just become a kind of, yeah, I don't even know if you would walk the talk if you were for everyone and for everything. It doesn't sound authentic. So for us, it was really important to have that. And now the values are in individual assessments, daily feedback. Everything is brought back to a value. Everything we do can be brought back to value. And I think that's also something that I would highly recommend, is to build your values in a way that it really becomes your DNA and your kind of compass of where do you stand and where do you want to grow within your organization? How do you want your talents to grow within your organization for that mission and purpose? So so that we've been using, and as I was mentioning, it's who and then what. So I still believe that that's one of our key assets, is making sure we have the right talents on the right experiments, and hoping that we can together achieve our mission. So that's it for me. I hope it was it sparked some reflections, and would love to hear from you and answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Alice, for this, interesting perspectives and the way you're tackling the subject. I think it's very interesting. We want to also hear the feedback of the audience, so feel free to send us your feedback on the chat. So in the meantime, we received some questions, I believe pretty targeted, and I'm looking forward myself too to hear the answers. So I'll be starting with the first question from Amal. And she's asking us, first she's saying, thank you for the presentation. And what are the best practices when supporting B2B startups?
It's so best practices that we've got a whole kind of, how do I say, program dedicated for them in supporting them. I don't know if there would be kind of one or two key elements that I would push. For us, it's always been giving them kind of that a foundational structure that can support them in identifying what are their opportunities, prioritizing what opportunities to focus on, supporting them in kind of the overall operational side of the business, which is linked with their talent, which is linked with their kind of whole supply chain, which is linked with management of their clients, and then figuring out who are the right experts, investors, mentors that can support them, specifically with B2B clients, specifically with figuring out what are the right pricing margins in their industry. But I wouldn't say we have this kind of perfect recipe for B2B. It's more, again, as I was mentioning before, is we have kind of a clear program outline depending on the maturity of the business. It's less focused on if they're B2B or B2C. Of course, there are differences, and of course, we see it even more so for those that are absolutely not software. So the offline element and the hardware element is much more important and requires different funding and and timelines, but then it's really figuring out the right people, right time, with regards to the maturity of the business and the team, how much they need help on talent.
Makes perfectly sense. So we're gonna have a second question from Ashraf. He's saying, "Thank you for sharing this learning. I appreciate it. What are your recommendations to build a strong pipeline of mentors?" And a second question related to the same subject: how do you keep them motivated?
Yeah, it's a really tough one. I think where we were lucky is SEEDSTARS, one of our bigger activities early on was focused on building the community. That's all we did because we had the global startup competition. So we were running over 100 events in 60 like we started in 20 markets and we've grown since, I think this year we were in 100 virtually. And that has been kind of in the way we started. So we would scale globally, have a footprint, build a brand where people would want to associate themselves with, because we aligned on missions and values that made sense. So I think that part of community building, we invested in it very early on. That said, now that we have a network, is how do you keep them engaged? We now have a team that's working on this kind of, whatever software it will be, but a matching platform that really they have spent time in qualifying the mentors, their expertise, their interest, and also their incentives, which are very different. Some are extremely impact driven and they consider that they want to allocate X amount of hours with entrepreneurs in sectors, in geographies, whatever their interest may be. Others are looking for a financial return. Others are looking to access other key activities in SEEDSTARS. So they want to be part of also the investor network. They want to access a specific event. They need specific introduction. So we've tried to be able to answer to those different demands, which is not easy, because we're starting to have a very large network of mentors, but I think that's the key, is figuring out what's that incentive, and then we are experimenting on the best way to more or less standardize it so that it's not like customized one-on-one. If not, we're not able to scale. And then we do make the effort that there is a due diligence and work on profiling the entrepreneurs so that it's a great experience on both ends. Not that the mentor finds themselves with completely irrelevant founder or worst, uninterested founder, which you can have a lot when you make these programs, networks. So that's also a big effort. But I don't have the latest statistic, but we have someone really running just the mentorship kind of connections. And I was hearing from a team member saying that now if a startup makes a request in 24 hours, they have 2-3 responses from mentors willing to jump in. So that's really
Amazing.
Interesting and attractive to see at a global level.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Alice. So just to follow up on the same mentor part. So did you start at the beginning, with your own circles, and then the referrals helped growing it? If you had, to think of the means used in order to start from step 1 to, actually it's growing, right?
Yeah. So step 0 was really knocking on doors. I remember it's with Pierre-Alain that we were building the SEEDSTARS World Competition, and we literally went duck on the map of where we would go. We chose 20 countries. And at that time, we had 2 networks, the Swiss embassies that were really supportive in helping us on the ground. And we had like family members, whoever we knew that could maybe connect, because we had no idea, like we were coming to Rwanda and to Mexico for the first time. And Pierre-Alain was part of this really great network called Sandbox, which is young leaders under 30. And so we had these really great contacts also on the ground that helped us. But out of the 20 countries, I remember a couple, we really had nothing apart from kind of a personal friend that had no clue about the startup ecosystem, but at least we knew where we would sleep the first night. And then it was knocking on doors. It was knocking on doors. And this was 8 years ago. So especially in some regions around the world, we were coming in where there were just like 1-2 accelerators, maybe a co-working space, but not even really startup oriented. There might have been some form of government agency focusing, but more on micro entrepreneurs, whereas we were very targeted on the startups. So it was just doing it. And then every year we built on the competition to help our network, and people jumped in because they believed in what we were doing.
Nice. I really like the practical part of your answer, so thank you for that. So we're having Salima saying, I really appreciated this presentation. And she's very straightforward, asking for what's the secret sauce to start from scratch a strong community around my incubator.
You know, if we had secret sauces on
Exactly.
everything, it would be a much easier
Looking for the easy path.
No, I think that's what even you were saying. It's really baby steps. It looks grandiose now, and you can play with any number and do kind of a nice packaging, but it's really baby steps. I mean, we've been doing this for 8 years. And we're still figuring out what's the right hook for different types of mentors and experts. You have to have a compelling story. I think even more so in this new strange era that we're living, that will define a new norm. But in the meantime, we are virtual, and it's very difficult to connect and attract people from around the world or different industries expertise. And so I think more than ever, you have to become an expert of storytelling. You have to tell a story. Just think about how you are consuming information and building your points of view today. It's very different to how we were doing it 12 months before. And so and that's why we did our documentary, and we're doing more and more video content, because we really believe the rules of engagement and attracting people is more and more different. So build a compelling story of why they should spend time for these specific entrepreneurs. What are they jumping into? And then we've always been really, I think we've always done it quite well, the whole logistic part, so that it's as seamless as possible for them to interact and engage.
Nice. So we're also having Mahdi asking us today, what advice to an accelerator that wants to grow on the region?
So there are different ways to grow. You can do that by partnerships. You can start building consortiums. It's very difficult like that, because I would need to understand your mission and what is the types of services that you're trying to provide. Is there a gap in markets that you would want to expand in? And if not, are there key partners or accelerator programs within you where you can bring very clear assets that makes the partnership viable for both ends? One way for us to identify what were the right opportunities that we should focus on, and then define what would be the most appropriate growth strategy depending on the assets that we had or the assets that we wanted to build, was the Market Opportunity Navigator, which it's a framework that has been built by a professor in a university, and it's really helped us define that. And so we've even done now webinars and integrated that in many of our programs, but you can find it online very easily. And they even give you kind of a whole virtual framework you can work with. But it's true, we've used a lot of research and science, and there's so much out there that can help you. So we've always used these types of tools to help us answer those types of questions, because if not, you're kind of doing it in the air, where we always want to pull ourselves back to what does the data says. If we were to jump into this framework, what are the results coming out of it? Exactly. That's always been our approach.
Data is the new oil, so don't forget that. It's a great actually answer for introducing the next question. Amira is asking us, what tools do you recommend to manage our activities in an efficient way? So I guess it's from a management perspective, and I know she's part of an accelerator.
Our activities as in tools within the program, or tools for the day-to-day of an accelerator?
Yeah, tools for the day-to-day of an accelerator to be more efficient, because I'm assuming from her answer that, you know, a lot of time loss here and there, managing things, and then you don't find yourself going to the essentials.
So I've got like a tools guru at SEEDSTARS that I think he could build an impressive list, so we're using OKRs, not religiously yet, but there is this strong element of like defining objectives by, so we inspired our management approach with the Spotify, Patagonia of this world that really focus on a flat management and this kind of platform approach of how you interact with talent. Because ideally, I think the future of organizations is not going to be these kind of silo hierarchies with employees. I think we're going to become platforms where talents plug in and plug out as seamlessly as any other type of resource. So your best investment would be to define what is the culture and the kind of DNA of your platform, and understand what is it that you are providing, and what is it that, or like what value are people perceiving out of your platform, and how much can they build out of your platform. So we've used, so Spotify has great content online. You have the whole teal organization theory that we've used a lot in defining the organizational structure. Then in operations, we work a lot with OKRs, and we have kind of this matrix approach to how our teams run. Again, I think it's funny, but I always keep coming back to the culture and how do we manage our talents, because then the rest is kind of a bypass of it. But then we really use Slack for communication, Zoom for speaking. We constantly have these performance evaluations on our leadership, on the happiness level, on the individual assessment. It feels as if when I say it, it sounds a bit corny and kind of cliche, but we really act upon it. And I think that's the most important thing. If you're not acting upon activities that you put in place, meetings that you're doing, processes that you're pushing teams to abide by, then it's probably not very valuable.
No, it makes perfectly sense. So make your team happy so that they become themselves also gurus to find all the tools here and there, because there are so many tools every day, you know, discovering new ones. So thank you for that, Alice. So we're having 1 minute to go, so I will just ask a last question, and I kept it for the end. So Walid is telling us any advice on how to manage post-COVID challenges.
No, I think it's really what I've been saying. Your mission, so your intention from what who you are in the ecosystem as accelerators, incubators, participating in support, your mission has never been as important as now, because it has more or less impacted the sustainability and the growth of these businesses. So it's, for me, the best advice is figuring out what's the long-term mission and the activities you want to experiment, and stay in experimentation mode, because in such uncertain time, already when it's business as usual, we operate with not full information. Let's say we operate on 70% of the information. In these times, we're probably at 30-40%. So really build that agility and experimentation so that you can continue and support these entrepreneurs, because it's invaluable what you're bringing to the ecosystem.
Thank you so much, Alice. C'était vraiment un délice de vous parler et d'échanger avec vous cet après-midi. So thank you so much again.
Merci beaucoup.
It's the end of our session, so I want to give you maybe last word you want to share with this ambitious ecosystem having so many questions.
No, yeah, I mean, it's so cool. I mean, you guys make it makes my day. Speaking with you recently, I would love to see all your faces and spend more time talking about it, because we really don't have the perfect sauce, or I don't know how we said it before, but it's a really big pleasure to be part of this larger team and community of people trying to make some form of difference.
On est très reconnaissant pour your giving back spirit and your time that you're giving to the audience, to us, and interacting. Very, very grateful for that and thankful. We hope to see you hopefully maybe once things get better, visiting us in Tunisia and maybe having the live sessions. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.